Well, hello. I'm Porter,
And I'm Penny.
and you have found once again Gripping Iron, a place where we sit down and have safe discussions in an anonymous fashion about the gospel of Jesus Christ as it has been restored in these latter days. And we're grateful to have you with us and to listen to our ramblings, and hopefully it stirs something in you. If not, sorry, blame it on Penny. What do we want to talk about today there, Penny?
Today I went to my husband and I said, I'd really like to talk about service and callings in the
And
church.
And why did you specifically want to do that? What's been going on in your life here recently?
So I have a pretty big calling that is somewhat stressful, and I'm a seminary teacher. And I'm also a teacher in real life. So I get up extra early in the morning and I teach um, high school students the gospel. And then I go to school and I teach kindergarten students, and then I come home. Well, and then I don't come home and I prep for kindergarten, and then I come home and then I prep for seminary. And I just feel as though everything else in my life has completely fallen apart around my ankles. And I
Around
struggle
your
with it. I
ankles.
struggle with it. Um, I struggle with it pretty badly as far as I sometimes I get anxiety, and I I want things to be just right, and there's not enough time in the day to get everything right. And so I waffle back and forth on, is it ever appropriate to ask to be released? Is it appropriate to push yourself to the extent that I'm pushing myself? Do I need to let my job fall by the wayside? Does my family fall by, like, does a person manage all of this? And I know that this is something that a lot of LDS people struggle with.
I
And I
think
know that a
all.
lot of people cite this as reasons why they've left the
Yeah,
church,
yeah, yeah.
is this kind of pressure and stress. And it's not affecting me in that way at all. The last thing I would want to do is give up my testimony in the gospel. Um, but it does not take away the fact that this is a real struggle that I'm struggling with. And not to even add another layer on it, but my husband is the branch president, and he knows how important this calling is. And
And as
I know
part of
how
my
important
life,
this
I work 12-hour rotating shifts. So I'm
is.
constantly trying to just get some sleep
Yeah.
someplace at some point.
Um, it's just, it's a lot.
And also to just fully understand that Penny is also, to my constant frustration, but to also my constant benefit all the time, is not somebody who just halfway does things. She has an inability to just phone it in. She has to, and we've had this, so this is no news to her. We've had this conversation many times. I am a union hourly worker. So for me, you never give time to the company, man. That's job one. You make them pay for every second you're on the clock. And she, as a professional teacher, is one of those suckers that gets a salary, and it just drives me crazy. All the extra time she puts in, and then administration puts more things on her, and she just has to take it, and it just takes up so much time, and it's what this woman does is bizarre to me, frustrating at times, but also amazing. That how does she not just say, I'm done with this? It is so bizarre. And then you put personalities on top of it. I don't even know how that goes. But that all just paints the picture that not just us are going through, but probably the vast majority of Latter-day Saint families are going on out there, of serving callings, of earning a living because nobody gets paid when they serve their callings, and how you manage all that. And it's one of those things that, in the church, you're always taught, hey, if you put God first, there's time for everything else. And I believe that to be true. That doesn't mean that it's easy. I
I
think
would
there's some
change
cuts
that.
that you have to make. I think
Yeah.
there's some sacrifices that you have to make by placing the first things important. And you'll always feel guilty for leaving out something.
I don't think I would change that just a bit. That we're not told that we'll have time for everything. The thing is if we put those things first, then the Lord will reveal to us the things that we should be letting fall by the wayside.
I have
These are
never had anybody say that to me, but I believe that to be correct.
like he makes it really obvious of what time, how you would be wasting your time versus how you can use your time more effectively. The problem for me is that, oh, how I long to just waste some time. But then when I waste time, I feel so guilty because if I'm wasting time here at home because my brain is burnt from school, then I'm not getting anything done in my home. If I'm getting things done in my home, then I should be spending more time studying for my calling. And in both my jobs, when I think of seminary, I think of it like a job kind of, but both these things, I have children's um children's good, like how they will be affected always on my mind. Like
Yes.
they're
That's how they
I can't
sucker
think of the
you
word
in.
all of a sudden. I
That's
can't
how they
think
sucker you. The benefit of others.
the
Yes.
benefit of others. Like I can't let the teenagers down.
Yep.
I there could be something.
Can't let my husband down. Can't let the kids down. Can't
Yeah.
let the parents down.
And
Typical guilt stuff.
there's always someone that like will be adversely affected if I'm not giving my all.
When in reality, those people will do just fine if you gave 10%. they have their free agency too. But that's another topic for another time.
I don't know if that's true.
I mean, sure, yeah, you always want to bring your best, but
other people feel when you're not giving your best. If someone's phoning something in, you can tell.
You giving your 10% is like anybody else giving their 120%.
I
Anyway,
don't know if that's true.
but to be clear, what we're doing today is not a complaint, right? And in anything we ever do, we want to be clear and upfront. Hopefully it won't be taken as us complaining or anything like this. What we do want to talk about is this is a struggle, but this is how it's been really cool for us and the benefits of this struggle, which I think is the more important message, right?
So let's talk about what our callings are and how we received our calls first.
I think you just did. I think you talked about that.
Well,
You're a seminary teacher, I'm branch president.
Right. But do you remember when you were called? Do you remember what that was like?
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
For the branch president specifically?
Yeah.
Well, there's always been, I've always said my whole life, I'll do anything that the Lord puts in front of me except for one calling. I had no interest in being a bishop or branch president because I just know me and I know it just wouldn't go well. It would be a train wreck. So I always knew. But then that day came when a stake president, a man that I love incredibly much, is sitting in front of me in my living room saying, we've prayed about it, talked about it, was not certain about it, went back to the Lord to get clarification. I think he said twice other times because he didn't know about me.
Are you sure, Lord?
And got the confirmation each time and extended me the call. And when he said that, it's like I'm a consecrated. I try to be a consecrated individual. I am a consecrated individual. I think I could do better. How can I say no to that? That is how I received my calling, and so that was my hard line. I'm never going to do that, to where it just instantly got lasered out of me, and it was like, okay, let's go. Let's run this train wreck. Do you want to talk about how you got yours? Because it's a much different experience.
How I got mine. So how I got my calling was, so when your ward, or depending on where you live, we don't have seminary as part of our school. I teach early morning seminary, which means kids have to, outside of school, have to be taught seminary. It's not release time or anything like that. So it's a sacrifice on everybody's part who's involved. And so finding teachers is very, very difficult. And we tend to run through them pretty quickly because it's a high burnout. It happens quickly. And as my husband's been branch
and we got specific challenges to our geography as well.
Yeah, and he might have a different opinion of this. So brace yourself for what his opinion might be like. Oh, no. But how I experienced it was, he had gone through this a couple of times. He'd lost some good seminary teachers. And that was rough for him, just trying to find that next seminary teacher. And as you are in...
Because I come from a specific outlook on the seminary teachers. I'm not just trying to find somebody who will do it. my love and care for the youth is such that I'm trying to find the best person to get in there to engage the youth in an early morning thing that most of them I don't really want to do, but they're doing it just to be. So I understand the challenges to that calling. So I'm trying to get the best people, not just somebody to plug it. Sorry.
Right. But the longer you're branch president, the harder it is to fill those types of positions. Would you agree? Just
I
because
don't know if length of
you've
maybe,
used the
yeah,
people that
maybe.
may have come to your mind first. Anyway, so I think in general, he knows me well enough that he knew what this ask would mean. So of course he doesn't have to ask me. It comes down from the stake. So the stake would ask, so do you have any, names in mind that we can pray over or that we can, and he submitted my name. He didn't tell me that he talked about me, but I think that the stake presidency was really like, really, are you sure you want to do that?
They were like, what?
knowing the demands on his calling, knowing the demands of my job, and knowing the demand that it would have on the family, they were like perplexed by it. And so when I got the calling, I was called by the stake presidency member that was over church education, and he said, he kind of laid it out and he said, we really want you to think about it and stuff like that.
Sister Penny.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Sister, this is the calling, and we know that it's a lot, and we just want to check with you. We know that your husband has this calling, and we know how much you have. You have 4 children, you got lots going on. We know it's a huge ask. How do you feel? And I have not at this point in my life said no to callings, right? I was raised that when you were asked to give to do a calling, that you accepted it. Now in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, how in the world can I take on another thing like this? How can I do it? Feeling already stretched. And it wasn't the last time I've been stretched throughout this seminary calling. I've gone from teaching one kindergarten to teaching a whole extra communities kindergarten as well.
Yeah.
So I'm teaching much larger classes and anything. Anyway, and so I didn't know how I was going to do that. But I did know that the world was in tumult, and there was a lot of things that gave me concern and fear and anxiety at times. And
she loved the youth.
And I love the youth.
And she loved me.
I love you, yes. And I think that really what the Lord spoke to my heart was to get through all these difficult things, what would be better than to be forced to be studying your scriptures on a daily basis to help soothe all these other things. So I was able to say yes because of that I needed to be in my scriptures more, and that the study would increase my ability to overcome some of my fears and anxiety of other things that might hold me back in the different things I was trying to accomplish.
And that has 100% happened, right?
Yes. And it has also helped me with some testimony things that I had. I've always been kind of a little reticent in church history, and then I had to teach Doctrine and Covenants, and I had a lot of worry about that because I was like, what if they ask me about this or that? And so I really had to study.
Penny is a person that is really good at pushing that I believe button and not having to delve into things. If it makes sense, great. If not, I'm believing. Right. And some of those things, I've certainly tried to talk to her about, and it's kind of like, okay. But yeah, her experience as a seminary teacher has literally taken away those things. Yeah. Most of them, I would think. Yeah.
Yeah. I would,
and she's taught me things that I thought I knew, but apparently I didn't know. So
as I taught church history, a lot of things just really was like, oh, well, yeah. And I really looked deeply into a lot of things, and it wasn't surfacey type exploring. I really wanted to be able to answer some questions. So I would study pretty hard on a topic that I'd go to like the Joseph Smith papers and things like that to study on a topic that I wanted to have some kind of answer to. When people throw something out or something that the kids might have heard in their community or whatever, am I going to have an answer for that? And am I going to be able to answer that correctly? I've been a church member all my life and had a strong testimony of the church. I didn't use those things as stumbling blocks. I would just kind of skirt them and not worry about them. Does that make sense? To just be like, I'm not really worried about that. I have all this other stuff
The
that's
I
true.
believe button.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But the
Which is
idea,
not bad. That's a good tactic to take.
the
It's
idea
not
of
the best,
getting
but it's good.
something wrong and it becoming a stumbling block for a youth really changed my desire to really dive deep into some of these things that some people think of as dangerous territory, or something that might not be faith promoting if you dig too far, right? So every time I did my digging, it was more faith promoting. I found more things to convince my or to buoy up my testimony, as far as, well, that was not that big of a deal at all. Like,
Which is always the way it is.
I don't really
right?
see why that is always brought up. So that was a huge help to me. But on the flip side, that was such a huge ask, right, for me to do that. And on the flip side of my experiences and callings, the most difficult calling for me has always been the calling I've never been asked to do. And that has been my visiting teaching / ministering calling.
Well, that's ridiculous.
Has always been the hardest for
and
me
it's not
to
a
do.
calling.
It is a calling.
It's not a calling. You never get called
Everyone's
to
called to that.
It's a part
It's a
of a
responsibility.
consecrated individual. It's you make that decision to be a minister now, is what we call it, by the way. The minute you say, I will be baptized. You certainly do it when you say, I'm going to take out my endowments.
Right.
It's personal pet peeve of mine when people talk about ministering as something extra. It is being a horrible hypocrite myself, it is the fundamental thing of what the gospel should be in our life. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So for that, to me, that one is very overwhelming as well. And I've never been fortunate enough to get anyone active. I've always had to doorstep people.
We've always had
I've always had to go with a gift to not get kicked out or kicked off the porch.
Just knock yourselves out and got nowhere.
The social act is just so very difficult for me. Oh, it has been for years and years, and
ministering
I just have never
can be a
got
whole
around
other topic that we should talk about, because there's so many stories that we have.
Oh, man.
But let's talk about these benefits of a calling. And I mean, it's impossible, as we've been talking about the callings, that's what we've been talking about also, is the benefits of the calling. So it's impossible to talk about one without the other. But I just want to preface all of this with this thing that was taught. It was actually listening to a podcast a while back, and I'm not going to name the name of the podcast because it's connected to an individual who I am not appreciative at all, and will not name the one who shall not be named. But I spent a lot of time in the camp of the enemy listening to this stuff that they spout. And this podcast was one of them. And it had these sisters who, by the way, were not anti at all. They're awesome, fully active sisters. Maybe had some viewpoints that were challenging, but were just going about it in great ways. I really appreciated their outlooks. And they were talking about the challenges that sisters have living up to ideals in the gospel and stuff. And they mentioned one of the sisters, who was a psychologist, psychiatrist, psych something, was talking about how study after study shows that when people look at, I have to go do something, that increases anxiety, that increases depression, that increases all the negatives. Versus when they look at it like, I get to go do, or I have the opportunity to do this, well, now that changes everything. That is, you look forward to it. It's something you anticipate. It's something you enjoy. It changes everything. And they were talking about this in the sense of mothers, how there's many mothers who they have to stay home with these kids. And there's some who just, I am so grateful that every day I get to stay home with these kids. And that profoundly changes how they view everything else through depression, anxiety. It's like when you get that first job, and it's like, I get to go to work. I get to go make a paycheck, and I get to put on a McDonald's uniform, and I get to do these cool things. And then fast forward, 5 years later, and you're like, ugh.
Gotta go to work.
Why do I have to go to work? So anyway, it's that same idea. So let's talk about more of the benefits of these callings.
So for me, usually when I receive a calling, there's never been a calling where I've automatically felt like, oh, I got this down pat. This is something no problemo. This will be easy. There's always been some kind of stretch that has been connected to each calling that I've ever had. When I was a primary chorister, I know nothing about music and I sing terribly, right? The love for the children is there. That's the easy part. But and to entertain them, that came fairly easy. But to have the confidence to go up remember when the stake asked me to do
Mm-hmm.
the state conference
Mm-hmm.
primary choir,
Mm-hmm.
and to have to go and sing in front of all those other primary teachers and get the children to sing, and even not even really knowing how to conduct music properly and time it
Mm-hmm.
properly, and to have to stand in front of the stage and sing with these children in front of everyone was so hard for me. That was a huge stretch. That was something that took me to an area that I had never pictured myself doing. I've been taken to those places in the Young Women's presidency as the Young Women's president. I've been taken to those places in Relief Society where I've had to negotiate between two opposing sides of the same ward. Do you know what I mean? Or people fighting, or people having difficulty. I've been taken to those places through my husband's callings when he was ward mission leader, and I had little tiny babies, and we were feeding 6 missionaries at a time, plus my little babies, and things of that nature. So callings have definitely stretched me, but they've also showed me that the limitations that I would put on myself are not the limitations that the Lord would put on me. That He sees my ability much better than I see myself. And so I've come to trust that. Even though I feel like sometimes it's impossible, I have come to trust the fact that, you know what? The Lord wants me here, and the Lord will help me figure out how to do it. And it won't look like Sister So and so did it, and it won't look like, the perfect Molly Mormon will do it. It's going to be a little grittier, and it's not going to be as refined,
Which is
but it
something that's
will be
always
okay.
challenging for individual saints who have callings, is they always want to do it like that person, and they wanted to look like that ideal person who they
Mm-hmm.
thought was in that calling.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not intended. I mean, if that was the
Well, it
intent,
gets
then
you in
they just would
trouble
have kept.
too.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
It gets you in trouble, and it messes with your ability to actually, if you're doing it for those purposes, it messes it up. I remember, and I think that's probably, and this is my own opinion, this is not doctrinal, but
Own opinion warning.
not too long ago, they stopped doing ward activities director as a calling. And I think that
Although
is,
some wards are going back to that.
well, no, we've been told in the handbook now that we can. That's a choice that the wards have now.
Huh.
But the reason why I think that happened is because the one-uppedness and the comparisons were getting so crazy with what people were able to do, especially in the high LDS populous areas, were able to pull off, versus maybe a little branch in a small town with hardly any LDS people. It was getting a
Podunk.
little ridiculous. And so it had to be brought back down to to a more basic level. And now I think people have a better idea of,
Maybe.
and maybe it's gone too far the other way, where now all of our activities are just kind of blah. So now we got to find that middle. We got to find it to where it can be uplifting, but not tax the people or become something where people are looking for their own
Glory.
glory and pride. Yeah.
Look at what I did.
Do you know what I
Maybe.
mean? I think that
Maybe.
might be something. That's my opinion, by the way.
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That's just your opinion.
Yeah.
The other benefits of the calling, one of the big things that I love about our church is that it's a volunteer organization, right? So there's a screen out portion to it. There's a efficiency portion to it. There's a purification portion to it, to where, and those are probably all the wrong words to use, but listen, if you're going to be part of this church, this is not a church that you go and just view. It is a church that you are asked to, encouraged to, and really, really desperately needed to participate in. I mean, this is not a church where you go and say, oh, that was a nice talk. This is a church where you go and say, I got to give a talk that makes a difference today. How am I going to do this? And I think that totally changes the church experience. Maybe negative for some people, but that's the development that we all have to go through. I think it's by design something that makes us better. I think it's a better way to do it. I think it's efficient because there's nobody in the church that they're getting paid, right? There's nobody at the ward or stake level that is getting paid for anything that they do. So they're doing it for the right motives. Listen, there's plenty of good preachers out there that get paid and yada, yada, yada. It is always a corrupting feature in any religion when there's somebody else holding the purse strings. And we don't have that. And I think that is just such a bright line, efficiency, good moral place to stand with callings. And then that last part is the whole idea. What did else I say? Purification, I think. I don't know what I was going with.
Screening. You said what was screening about?
Well, I think there's a portion of it to where a lot of people are like, yeah, I don't want that kind of church. I want a church where I can just go
for entertainment
and
purposes.
Yeah, diddle around. Hey, there's lots of every other church out there you can do that in.
Diddle around.
Go knock yourself out. But it is an essential part of exaltation that we're trying to see, that we need callings. We need to all be engaged and not just viewing it like we do a movie, but actually living the movie that we want to live. So I think that's a huge benefit of this volunteer organization that we have. And I think it also builds a lot of compassion. I think it falls short of that. I think the members do better when they look at individuals with callings in the same way that they would want to be looked at if they had that calling. And you see that, of course, with church leadership all the time, whether young women's president really say, well, they didn't do it this way and it hurt my feelings or something like that. Yeah, absolutely. Because guess what? If you're doing it, you would do it in a way that would hurt somebody's feelings too, right? So it requires forgiveness. It requires mercy. It requires understanding and charity. And those are all seem like pretty good Christ-like qualities to try and have. You don't get that in other churches. Not that I'm trying to bash other churches, but I will certainly shine a light on this one. What are other benefits of callings?
Well, relationships, I think.
Yeah.
Building
Community.
relationships. I think if you are doing it to connect with people, I think a lot of people have difficulty, or we've been told that we need to love everyone. Well, that's a really difficult commandment. And if you don't put yourself out there, you're not going to, even like people. I think most adults are like, I don't even like people. I like 10 people, right? But that's not
10?
what we're supposed to do.
10?
I don't know.
I don't even know if I'm one of those people.
But calling stretch us in that way as well, to help us to learn to love people. And we'll always reach people that we serve better if we're loving them, right? So in my job, in my day job, every once in a while I get some really difficult students with really difficult problems. And until I can bond with those students, and sometimes it's hard on both sides. They have a hard time bonding to me, and I have a hard time bonding to them because, quite honestly, it's just kind of a nightmare, right? It's hard to bond to someone when they're throwing your things across the room, right? Or screaming that they hate you at you for an hour. But until I can bond with that child, until that child trusts me and knows that I love them, and then I can teach them. But until I have that relationship with that child, the academics doesn't go anywhere. So
Bonding with porcupines.
Bonding with them, yes. And so in your church calling, sometimes you'll have a ward where it's very, we've had wards that are just really well connected.
Yeah.
And the wards just really function really well. And we have been in some wards that are so
at war,
not functioning.
My goodness.
That are just having a terrible time. And really, I've been in branch council or ward council meetings where people were literally yelling at each other across the room. And so depending on where your ward is, it might be easy or it might be difficult, but your callings and working together and really praying about who you want to serve with you if you're put in a leadership position, and getting that inspiration can change the dynamic of a ward or a branch. Because if you reach across an aisle and use someone that you might not have a knee-jerk reaction to want to bond with, the Lord will help you bond with that person.
Yeah. 100%.
Through service to others.
If you are in the right place, right? If you're not haughty, if you're not prideful, and I'll call that what it is,
If you just choose your best friend every time for every calling,
which we see,
you are going to stunt. Well, you might not fail, but you're going to stunt your growth.
Think about everybody we know who chooses their best friend as a calling. They are not serving to their full capacity.
Well, that's who we know. That might not be. That's kind of broad.
I mean, it's anecdotal, but it's a pretty large
sample.
I think
the idea is that you're stunting your own growth. you are keeping yourself from loving another person.
It just becomes so cliquish. Yeah.
It does. It becomes cliquish, and then it becomes closed off, and then people start to get their feelings hurt again, like you said.
Yep. They don't feel the spirit because they don't feel comfortable. Side note, when we're talking about bonding, Penny was talking about bonding and how callings help us do that. Studies have shown that the chemicals that promote bonding for humans, for females, it's the same chemicals that are released when you feel safe. So for females, safety equals bonding. For males, it is when you overcome obstacles together, when you have a teammate that you overcome something great.
Accomplishment?
Accomplishment or going to war or something like that. You could hate that person, but you are bonded to that person. It's the same chemicals that are released in that form bonds for. It's just an interesting little side note.
Yeah, I agree with that, actually, for sure. So, as a branch president, I asked you, because he's overripe. My husband is overripe. He has served for over 5 years now. And so he is definitely coming.
I think I was ripe after the first year.
Well, you're a shriveled up ground piece of fruit at this point.
Yeah.
But I asked him, so going into this process, I thought, oh my goodness, my husband, he's going to go into this calling. He's going to come out transformed. He's going to be a new creature. That did not necessarily happen, but
I'm changed.
He has gained some things. And I asked him, I said, what do you think is something in your testimony that you have it's just really increased with this calling? And your answer was, what was your answer? Do you remember?
What are we talking about?
Was how people are called.
You mean the inspiration that goes behind people being called? Yes. That is something that has increased my testimony. Yes.
Yes. So tell us about that experience.
I mean,
we're talking about calling. So from my perspective, this was an important thing to learn from your perspective. Right. So not everyone has served in a bishopric or even a Relief Society presidency or something where you've had to really pray for counselors.
So yeah. I get what you're going at. Sorry, it took me a little bit to get keyed on.
Or like teachers or whatever.
So there is, and it's something that we talk about, but I don't think we give it serious heed to about how revelation is received for callings. To be clear, I've had people, I certainly think about callings a lot, and then I pray about callings, and then I bring these to my counselors, and we talk about it, we pray about it as counselors. And we do that on every calling. There's maybe been 1 or 2 callings that we didn't do that to. But it's certainly something. And
like librarian?
No, we
pray about librarian. Oh, yeah. I'm just wondering.
How demeaning you are towards librarians.
No, I just feel like
so it is something to see that even though you think, well, this person, how when you kneel together in prayer, your mind gets changed for you. And I've had it several times where it was either the counseling the counseling after the prayer or during the prayer itself, all their names went away except for one name. And that totally really changes how a calling is extended, because when you have that experience, it really profoundly changes. Number one, it's liberating at that point, because as you move forward, if that person does well or bad or anything at that calling, hey, I'm free and clear of it. That's very nice to be able to say, this was the Lord's will. Learn what you will.
Or in that vein, if they refuse it.
If they refuse it, yes. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But so it's very liberating, but it's also very encouraging. Encourage is the wrong word. It makes me more certain, right? If it was me giving a calling, hopefully it'll work out. Once it's the Lord that has given that direction, then at that point this is the person. And no matter if this person does great or fails or whatever, it's now our job to figure out why it's this person. And that has come through in several callings where a person's called and then branch members will come to me and say, this person's doing awful. They're messing up everything. They're ruining everybody's testimony. They're bringing Armageddon. It's awful. And I just say, okay, hold on. This is the problem I have, is that I know that this person is to have this call. No, you don't understand. This person said this and this person did this. I understand. And that's why you're a counselor there to help out with that or whatever. But at the end of the day, that person's the president of that organization, and we need to find out why. And to the line, even to, my counselors, they're concerned about it and stuff. I will release the counselors of that presidency or anybody who's having a problem serving with that president before I release that president, because that was a direction and I want to find out why. And I'm currently with a certain individual right now where everybody was up in arms about it. And this is, we've never talked about this, so don't try to put a face to it, because that's wrong. But where everybody was up in arms, and I said, no, we got to find out. And we released counselors for that person so they could get a fresh start. And this person doesn't even know that all this was going on. And as we've had different counselors in there, and we see she does some things really, really well. And she has encouraged people and brought people up really, really well, to where whatever mistakes that she might have made that was going to be the end of the world, they're nothing anymore compared to that. So that has been a huge thing for me. And then there's also, remember in the conversation, hopefully this is part of it, the whole setting apart somebody in a calling. And this happens a little bit when I'm a father giving a child a blessing. It happens on the reg as a branch president or bishop setting somebody apart for a calling, where I have in my mind some nice things to say. This is probably some things. But as I'm giving, oftentimes, as I'm setting somebody apart, words are taken from me. And there's words that are there that it's like, okay, well, let's see how this goes. And I'm uncertain, but they're just the words that are there. And as I move forward, that is probably the strongest I ever feel the Spirit, when I start to say the words that are in my heart or in my mind. And that is when I don't think I ever feel the burning of the bosom anywhere else except for then. And that's when I know this is something that is absolute assurity. So that has been very faith promoting things for me.
So knowing that, going through that experience, what does that tell you about your calling as a branch president and what the stake president told you?
We don't need to take this to another level.
What does that tell you about what the stake president experienced when he called you?
I see many similarities between that and the stake president giving me this calling. And even though I haven't been great at it and perfect at it, knowing that it's the same thing, I got to find out why I'm here. Let me tell you something. It isn't to get all the inactives active. That hasn't been the reason why. It hasn't been to
change it from a
help
branch
everybody
to a
feel
ward.
peaceful. It hasn't been to grow to a board. That's not the reason why. And I think I have a couple of reasons why, and we could maybe have another whole broadcast about that. But it could have been just to teach me to sit down and be quiet and let somebody else talk for a little bit. I don't know.
But I think for a lot of us, like, as a young woman, I grew up without priesthood in the home until I was a teenager. So just getting a better understanding and just having my husband explain that to me, I've never been this close to a bishop or branch president as in having one in my family, right? So having that explained to me and better understanding what he goes through and what he feels when he gives a calling really increases my testimony of the fact that if we do it, the Lord will magnify us, right? Or we'll find a purpose. We don't know. Sometimes callings last. I've been put in nursery and I thought, wow, this is great. I got little kids. I could be in this calling for 2 years and just stay with my little kids in here and not worry. And I've been in that calling for 3 weeks and I get pulled out and I'm put in Relief Society, right? And you're like, well, what was that for? You know,
a rest.
A rest. Yeah. There's a short respite before you go to Relief Society.
A nap on the beach.
So there are times when we'll have callings for many years. There's times when we'll have callings for just very short times. There's times when we have a very impactful calling that just lasts for a short time, like girls camp director or something like that has a huge impact on you, but it's only for a season. I cannot say still that I've loved all my callings. I haven't walked away from every calling and thought I would do that again.
Any calling?
No, yeah, I would do I mean, not that you get a choice, but children's chorister in primary, that was a fun calling.
Yeah.
And that was rewarding. It was hard, it was a lot of work. Well, it didn't have to be, but like as you've pointed out,
you made it.
I made it a lot of work. Doesn't have to be. It can be much simpler than I chose to do it. But I do look back through all those experiences with fondness. And it helps me identify with the other saints in the branch. I understand the pressures on a primary president. I understand what it feels like to be the woman that has to stand up and direct the music on Sundays. I understand what it's like. The only thing I will never understand is being a pianist because I can't play the piano. But much past that, I've been all over the place, right? So it helps me have a better understanding, compassion, love, and helps me sustain those that are working and serving in the church.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to be too critical.
Yeah, not to be
Because
too.
guess
Don't
what?
be so critical.
You suck
people.
too. And this all seems to kind of blend together, but we did want to spend a little bit of time also talking about why we do callings, because I think there's some misconceptions sometimes. There's probably a lot of guilt reasons why we do callings. So let's really look at real sharply at why we do callings, and then we'll have a conversation, and maybe you'd be better more to talk about, should we accept all callings? What's the role in that? Because I have kind of maybe a hard line on that, so we'll let you roll with that. But why do we accept callings? I think there's a reason we don't accept callings is because we're trying to earn salvation. That is one of the things that the antiers, and yeah, I remember watching this anti video because I spent a lot of time watching anti videos.
Which I don't recommend, by the way.
Yeah, no, don't do that.
Neither does
I
church
do
leadership.
it because I enjoy the heck out of the comedy, but nobody else should do that.
I don't do that.
Where these people are talking about, this person was talking about, yeah, I was high up in the church. And there's a person on this video who's talking, I was high up in the church and I was doing this and I was doing this. And everything was about earning my place and earning my salvation and then I came to an understanding through Christianity that Christ saves and there's nothing I can do to earn that. And I'm just like, what church did you ever go to? When was that ever taught to you that we earn salvation? And I'll just tell the story here real quick where a coworker of hers comes on up and she goes, Penny, Penny, I just want to tell you that no matter all the work you could do, you can never earn your place in salvation. That's Christ's job. Christ's already done that for you. And we're like, yeah, we know. That's not why we do any of this. To be clear, the reason why we do callings is because it shouldn't be what Penny does a lot, which is for the benefit of others. That shouldn't be the reason why. The reason why we should do it is because of what it does for us. And once again,
that doesn't sound right.
No, it's 100% right. Let me explain why. This was something that was really cleared out and lined out for me by this same podcast where these sisters were talking with the person that we won't speak of, where they were talking about expectations. And they say one of the things that mothers, they really need to ask themselves, if you were a perfect mom, would that mean that your children are all going to be perfect? Well, the answer, of course, is no, right?
Right.
If you were the worst mom ever, are all your kids going to be just horrible kids? Well, the answer is no, right? That's not why either, right? Mm-hmm. So why do we do that? Why do we do that if the outcome of our effort is not guaranteed? I mean, we all understand they have their free agency stuff, but why? Why are we doing this when we can do all of our kids grow up being inactive alcoholics who are just, ripping on the church? Why do we do all this? It has nothing. And I know I'm hardlining about this, but I just believe it 100%. It has nothing to do with them. That's on them. They have their free agency. They have their choice. They have their will. That's them. We use that to talk about, but we can also use that as a liberating factor for us as well. What they choose to do with the teachings that we gave them, that's on them. The reason why we teach it, the reason why we do our callings, the reason why we serve is it because it helps us become more Christ-like. If we look at everything we do with that viewpoint, then we'll always be successful. Then the process, think about Heavenly Father. A third of his children right off the bat, Aunt's grade. Do you think Heavenly Father I'm sure he felt bad about that, but do you think that he said, well, man, I really messed up here? I don't know. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But I have a feeling what he knew for those other 2/3, now these guys have a chance to become something more than they are now. So we have to get away from the reason why we do our calling is for others. we have to, I think we are better served when we look more at the reason why we do callings is to create a change in us, to help us become more Christ-like.
So would you say then, so our approach to having a calling being given would be, I wonder what the Lord wants to teach me from this calling.
That's a great way.
I wonder what the Lord has in store for me by accepting this calling.
Yes.
What is he trying to grind off? What is he trying to polish?
Yes.
What is he trying to bless me with?
Yes.
Huh, interesting.
And not only that gets us away from the whole have to versus get to thing, where if I'm doing it for others, then I have to. If I'm doing it to create a change that I can see a positive change, then I get to do that. And I think that's just better.
Interesting.
Sometimes it helps to listen to the anti-people.
Don't say that. Don't say that. We're not encouraging that. No, that's bad.
So, Penny, should we accept all callings?
My short answer, in my opinion, is yes. I think that if it becomes something terrible, you should have an open dialogue with your leaders about it. I have gone in and asked a bishop before to be released.
And you regret that.
That did not go well for me. I was in a ward where the Relief Society presidency was very fractured, and I was a new move-in, and I was put directly into the Relief Society presidency, and the Relief Society was fractured, and one half backed one counselor and one half backed the president, and I was new meat, and I had people from both sides coming to me and saying terrible things about either the counselor and some of those sisters or the president and some of her sisters, because it was a recently combined ward where two were struggling and they were brought together.
Because people are people. That's why.
And I felt as though, because I'm a people pleaser, I'm a peacemaker, I don't like conflict, and so I felt like I was trying to appease one group and then trying to appease the other group and trying to be kind on both sides. And I went into the bishop and I said, Bishop, you have got to release me. I said, I am basically ducking a wrecking ball every Sunday. And I said, I can't keep the rhythm long enough. I know I'm going to get hit by this wrecking ball. Either I'm going to upset one side or the other. And I can't handle the stress of this. This is not what it's supposed to be. And I'd never served in the Relief Society before. So this was my first experience serving in the Relief Society presidency, which is unfortunate. But the bishop just looked at me and he said, oh, sweet sister, let's kneel down and pray together. And I thought, oh, man.
Strong bishop move. Strong.
I'm not
Jedi mind tricks will not work on me.
I am not getting out of this calling. And counseled me in the end that is exactly why I was in the calling that I was in.
How dare that priesthood holder take away or want you to have a revelatory experience. Unbelievable.
But I believe that that sometimes we know, but if we're open to the counsel, if you can be open to the counsel, and if you can keep an open dialogue, and when your priesthood leaders do actually ask you how it's going, if you're honest with them and keep that dialogue going and don't just complain to everybody else and not
worst thing.
Yeah, and not like actually have that dialogue and try to fix it, then I think yes, you should say yes to a calling. If you hate the person you're going to serve, say yes to that calling. If you don't like kids and you get called to primary, say yes to that calling. If you've never gone camping in your life and you get called to girls camp, say yes to that calling.
Remember that next time they do trek.
I've done trek before.
You didn't do it last time.
I didn't. I did not sign up for that, but you went, so that was good.
That's not how that works at all.
But I think that yeah, it'll stretch you in a good way and you'll get something out of it. So the short answer is yes. Unless you feel like there is some information that the priesthood really doesn't know that you need to inform them of. If you have a recent diagnosis, if it's going to be bad for your health, if you're struggling in your marriage and
depression.
No one knows that, if you have some depression that you hide really well, if there are things that you say, I need you to know this and then pray again, I need you to know this and pray with me. I need to seek further. And it is okay to say, I need to pray about this. And it is okay to tell your priesthood leaders, I need to pray about this. And this is why I'm reticent about this calling. So the short answer is yes, try everything. See what you like. You might be surprised. But the long answer is you know you better than anyone else. And you need to trust.
Heavenly Father knows you better.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I'll give you that. But you need to trust your relationship with God and the Spirit and pray. And if you don't trust your ability to receive revelation yet, maybe you can lean on maybe we've given you enough encouragement that maybe you can lean on your priesthood leader's ability to receive it in your behalf at first. I don't know if that's even an appropriate thing to say, but
Well, I'll agree with you that you should accept any calling that comes your way. And once again, keep in mind, I'm maybe a bit extreme on this. Like when I extend a calling, I was taught early on that when you're extending a calling to a priesthood holder, and to this day, I don't do this. I do not ask the priesthood holder if they will accept the calling. I extend the calling to them. I explain to them what the calling will entail, and then I ask them if there's any family or occupational barriers that will stand in the way of them being successfully involved in this calling.
so you don't ask them, you extend it.
I extend it, and I ask them if there's any barriers with family and job, because you got to be able to do those too. And I make it very clear to that person, if you notice, I'm not asking you. I'm extending a calling. And I do that with the brethren. And the reason I do that is because I believe that calling to accept, that decision to make the calling was accepted upon baptism, was certainly accepted when you went and to the temple and became an endowed member and trying to be consecrated. It certainly is part of the oath and covenant of the priesthood, Doctrine and Covenants, section 84, right? This is what Doctrine and Covenants, section 84 is. So this is not a choice to be made. The only choice is, will you be engaged in this work that you've already consecrated yourself to? Once again, I'm extreme. Now with sisters, I don't do that. Not because I don't feel that they're capable or whatever. It's just I'm a little more scared to do it with sisters, I think. I don't want them. I don't want that to go bad. So I do lean more on.
Do you feel the same way about it though with sisters? You just approach it differently?
Maybe because I'm sexist. I don't know. I try not to be sexist.
No, but I mean, like, what's the difference? So you don't feel like sisters should say yes no matter what?
The difference in my head is that they're not Melchizedek priesthood holders. They're not.
It's not the same oath and covenant.
Agents.
Well, they haven't taken part in that oath and covenant of the priesthood.
Of the priesthood. They and it gets tricky because, I mean, really, they do live under that same oath and covenant and all that stuff. But it's just different in my head. And I could be totally wrong. I don't care.
Is it different? Is it different in, like, so I'm just playing the devil's advocate here. Is it different as, like, young men are commanded to go on a mission and young women are given the option?
I mean, that's kind of in the same vein. It's not because of, but it's something associated, akin to. Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
So yeah. So that is something I firmly believe in, that we should accept all callings and not accept them in a way in which, yeah, I'll do that, and then knowing full well you'll never do that, but doing it as an opportunity to say, okay, let's see where this takes me. As long as, once again, my work and my family will not suffer because of it. Let's see where this goes. Yeah.
I encourage all of you to have conversations like this. You learn things about your spouse.
You learn things about their mind.
Yep, I know.
So
I wish I could give you a calling sometimes.
You give me to-do lists that I don't do. Yeah.
What if I told you I was inspired to give you that to-do list?
I would just love you. Love you.
Oh, man.
So, did we want to talk about testimony from callings? Testimony. I think we've kind of talked about that a little bit.
Covered that, yeah. Just that it's increased my testimony.
Seminary has certainly increased your testimony.
I don't know if you put the time in to read the scriptures that seminary calls for,
it's going to equal.
It's like anything else. If you're reading your scriptures more,
if you do it with the right heart, I guess.
Yeah. So I shouldn't be gritting my teeth on Thursday.
Like you do, but that's you.
Do you want to do this? Hey, you want to do this with family? No, I have to go study seminary.
Now, we were going to talk about this, but let's talk about that in another one that we have planned.
Okay. Yeah, same thing. I think you just wrote it on the wrong sheet.
Didn't I?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, we're just going over our notes here. So let's talk about real quickly, because this is something that you struggled with. And to give you background once again, so there is a man-woman dynamic that happens in our marriage where Jennifer talks about a problem and I say, this is how we fix it.
Right.
And Penny does not want a fix. She wants to be heard and she wants me to understand the problem that she is perfectly capable of doing on her own and doesn't need me to fix it.
And his fixes aren't always the best, I just gotta say. He's got some lame fixes.
So there is this constant struggle, and that is personified by the fact that she has a very heavy-duty calling, that has a very heavy-duty job, that she has an inability to detach and call it in every once in a while, and has been recently struggling with the, do I have to do this for another year? That has been, which is perfectly natural, perfectly, I know as branch president, I've had a couple of those moments where I'm out, I'm tapping, this is it. And I think Penny was having one of those moments, and you came to me and I gave you the fixes, and you weren't listening to my fixes, and that frustrated me. And of course, I feel guilty because I know that I'm largely the reason why she's going through all this because of me, and so I feel guilty. And
it creates a strange dynamic when I'm trying to help out his branch. It's weird having
it's not mine.
No, but I mean, it's weird having the branch president as your husband because I rarely see him. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, he's putting his branch president hat on when he's talking to me.
He's pretending.
But it's hard for me to make that switch. It's hard for me to be like, listen, most of the time I just hear Porter. I don't hear branch president Porter. I just hear Porter. And I'm like, oh, geez, here he goes.
So after she came to me and said, hey, can we have a conversation without you getting frustrated? And I immediately getting frustrated. And then she said, okay, I'm going to step back and I'm going to figure this out on my own. You did. And where are you at with that? Without any help from me whatsoever.
So I think where I am with that, honestly, is I go back and forth. I don't know that I have a complete answer. I've thought of a couple different things as I've prayed about it. Because I have prayed and asked the Lord. Number one, my husband is not going to be the branch president much longer. And there's probably going to be a new branch president put in pretty soon. And depending on where that branch president receives revelation to where I will be, it might be in the same place or it might be changed. So there's that. There's also the fact that I am a mother of teenage boys who, like I said, are the only LDS kids in their school. And I had the honor of being the Young Women's president when my daughter was in Young Women's. And that was very rewarding for me.
And helpful for your daughter.
Helpful for her and some of the struggles that she went through. And I think that having these religious conversations with my boys as I study seminary and as they go through seminary and prepare for their missions, I feel as though I want to make sure that they have a good seminary experience. And one of the ways I can do that is just keep plugging along, right? And to just keep doing it. Plus, I have a good partner. And I don't know what's going to happen. I think my concern at the time was the way that I was asked to do another year is it's kind of like they're like, so are you in for another year? And
they gave you the option. That was the first mistake.
Seminary doesn't always feel like a calling. It's more like an appointment, right? They kind of
for life.
Well, no, they just kind of give you. They're just kind of like, oh, we found you. We're so glad you've done us a huge favor. They say that a lot. You've done us such a huge favor, and so at a point, it feels like, well, this isn't so much a calling as it is something I'm doing. Do you know what I mean? And so you start to feel like, oh, but at the same time, I told my husband, I'm like, you don't understand. When I was trying to explain my frustration, it's like, I will never be released from this. No one's ever going to come to me and say, you're released. What will happen is either someone's going to ask for me to go somewhere else, right? Or I'm going to tap. It's one or the other with this calling, with this seminary calling. And so for me, it's just like, is it time to tap? Or do I wait and see if the Lord puts me somewhere else? So as of right now, I am in the, let's wait and see if the Lord puts me somewhere else. If he needs me somewhere else more. Let's have faith in that first. And then if I get to the point where I really need to tap, I'm not going to tell my husband that I'm tapping. I'm just going to do it.
Because it's not, I'm not in that chain of command at all. She shouldn't,
I'm
she
just
doesn't
gonna
have to
go
go
to the
through me.
stake and say I'm done, and I
That's
won't
really-
ask him any more
that's the
questions
truth.
for guidance.
That has not been helpful.
That will be my decision to make.
And then I will get notified of who do we get. I'll be like, man,
You gotta find a new listener.
Penny! Dang, damn it!
So that's kind of where I am. Is that where you thought I was?
It seemed like it.
Yeah.
It seemed like it. I took it. I took the idea that you wanted to do this topic as a good sign. I thought, oh, that's promising, and it is relieving because I'm pretty sure I'll get released before you will, and then I could care less. That's great. But I can tell you this: I have been very grateful for your service as a seminary teacher and your service as a wife and mother, and I guess the work you do with those kids of yours at school. And all the effort you put in, and I could care less about the laundry most of the time.
Well, that's good because unless you're totally out of it.
And we have boys that can do dishes. They need to do it more, spend less time on the Xbox, and everything's going to work out great. And I think it's good. I really love what it has done for our Come Follow Me, because boy, I tell you, I don't study Come Follow Me like I should at all. I mean, every other week I'll try to read the scriptures, right? But boy, when it comes to that third hour, with the ones I can get to anyway, because I'm not always able to be there, just awesome discussions that you and the kids have had because you've been having it all week. And it's so valuable for our home. So I just really want to thank you for that.
Puts us in the scriptures daily.
So as we come to a close here, was there anything else you wanted to talk about this before we close this out?
So I think I'm good.
Okay. We're just grateful that for those that have hung in for this long to listen to us. That's awful rude to call.
Sorry.
Horrible. That you've hung in with us this long. We just wanted to put in a plug in for a podcast that I've listened to recently that I've really, really enjoyed. And I think you've listened to it before.
Oh, yeah.
Which is the All In podcast. There's a little gal on this All In podcast that just has such great energy and such great questions. It's an interview podcast. And she's had some great guests. She's had some guests that I kind of, okay, well, it's whatever. Fast forward. But there's been some other guests that have really captured my attention. But more than anything, she just comes from the right motivation, the right place, the right questions that really suits me. And I just want to, if I was you guys, I'd stop watching this, if you're watching this, and go watch All In or listen to All In podcast. She just does a phenomenal job.
And as usual, these people that she interviews, they have much more authority sometimes, education.
All the time.
I mean,
we're just a couple of knuckleheads.
For my husband and I, this is more than anything, this is an opportunity to discuss things that we think about in a way that we think that a lot of people think about things and wonder if they're thinking the same thing. But also, this is basically our journal. This is our love letter to our kids about the gospel. So that hopefully this will live on. And when our great-grandchildren want to know how we felt about the gospel, there's record of it.
Because we're horrible at keeping journals.
We're horrible at keeping journals. So that's kind of what this is. And if you want to come along that ride with us, great. You might have strong opinions about how we talk about things, and that's okay. But it's just something very personal that just happens to be public.
And I would just encourage everybody to be active. Be active in your guerrilla Mormonism, in your...
Why I believe.
Yeah, what?
Why I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Because... and be active in... Listen, I'm not a person that's great at reading the scriptures every day, but I can certainly listen to a podcast on my way to work. Sometimes at work. And that's good because there's people talking about the scriptures and you're still getting fed. It doesn't replace it. But
it definitely doesn't replace it, though.
Yeah, stop lecturing me. But it is so helpful. So I would just encourage you to be always listening to something beneficial. There's lots of good podcasts. Don't go to the anti stuff, but just stick with the good stuff. There's plenty of them to choose from. All In and all those others. If you just have it constantly on, no matter what, you will benefit from it. If you have it constantly on, people passing through your life will hear something and they will benefit on it. If you just have it constantly on and clicking on good things, that changes the internet logarithm. I don't know how, but I know that what that does is that brings it to the forefront of the internet. And that is a good thing too. The more that we're just clicking and listening to positive things, that makes the internet more positive. I think that's how it works. to my understanding to some degree.
It's a good hypothesis.
It's a good hypothesis. So go out there and make the internet a better place, and be an activist. Yeah.
Very nice.
All right, Porter. Or Penny. From Porter to Penny.
Don't forget to keep gripping that iron.
Grip that iron. See you next time, maybe.